Wargaming have released their most expensive vehicle in a long time, and it is a tier 9 premium vehicle. It is, of course, the Holiday Ops Old Reliable tier 9 medium British vehicle that is a kind of alternative version of the Cobra, which we currently have in the game. But there is a key difference. These two tanks are not the same. They might look the same, well, bar the skin that you get on the Old Reliable. The Cobra, however, has a reduced alpha damage over the new Old Reliable, and the Cobra has an autoloader. But the new vehicle, the Old Reliable, has a single shot gun. But what's great about this single shot gun is that you get the flexibility of being able to use that single shot in a variety of different situations, where the Cobra would be waiting for its reload to deal damage, and you can sometimes miss shells, you can sometimes end up with less damage than you were hoping for, and you ended up reloading for a ton of time. Whereas the Old Reliable not only has that single shot so you can maintain your damage over time, but it also gets an additional 40 damage on top of the standard rounds. And so you might be thinking, that sounds nice, but does it still get the Hesh rounds? And of course it does. Instead of getting the 490 alpha that you get with the Cobra's Hesh, you will get 540 alpha, which is really nice. And on top of that, the kind of standard HE, or the non-premium HE, the actual HE has 120 pen with 570 damage, making this really nice to play, and probably one of the more interesting vehicles that I've played in a while. Now, unfortunately, it is the skin that it has available to it doesn't count as camouflage, so you actually have to pay for camo on this tank, which, yeah, is just annoying. And seems like Wargaming are quite inconsistent with when they actually apply camo based on the tank skin that it has, but you know, hey ho, I guess it is what it is. And so yeah, you do have to put camo on it, even if it doesn't change the appearance, and it's going to cost you either gold or silver depending on what you want to spend. But the Old Reliable has the increase in damage, but what else does it get? Well, that is basically the only real difference. And of course, in order to do a fair comparison, we've taken the Commander out of the Old Reliable, so we see what the base values of the tank actually are compared to one another. Now, instead of using the coated optics or advanced optics, or whatever you want to call it, in the game, of course, we are able to use an advanced loader on the Old Reliable because it's a single shot, whereas the Cobra you can't do that, and so you suffer in the damage per minute department. So you can see on the Cobra 1600 damage per minute versus the 2184 damage per minute that the Old Reliable has. So you've got an additional about 30% damage per minute when you're playing in the Old Reliable, which is amazing, down to the fact that you can use the advanced loader. These are the kind of base values with only equipment. Obviously, when you put in a commander, this gets boosted even higher. So the great thing is that, yes, you can just deal a lot more damage in a shorter period of time if you're actually kind of able to hit every one of your shots, and if you can position quite nicely. The Cobra, however, can just burst that damage out all in one go, but then it has a incredibly long reload to be able to reload all of those, and in fact is 47 seconds without a commander. Now, so that is kind of where the difference is between the Old Reliable basically end. They are basically the exact same tank, and even the armor is the exact same when it comes to the two vehicles. So you can see here, we'll jump into the armor viewer, very much the same. So there's no real differences between that in these vehicles. The accuracy of the Old Reliable, 0.34 versus the Cobra, which has 0.36. So slight changes in that, and so you can expect that when you are playing these vehicles. Obviously, autoloaders typically will get worse accuracy than the single shot equivalent of the same tank. If you look at tech tree vehicles or premiums that can use either an autoloader or a standard gun, always the autoloaders typically will have worse accuracy, and that's because they want people to miss shells and stuff like that when they're using the autoloader, because in general autoloaders are usually better than the single shot equivalents for people that know how to position correctly, and generally for more experienced players in the game, autoloaders can be far more devastating. But with this tank, because of the fact that you get that extra 30% damage per minute, it is really, really amazing in comparison. So you don't actually feel like you're at a disadvantage by playing a single shot over playing the autoloading alternative, which is amazing. But my key problem with this tank is that it is incredibly expensive. The fact that Wargaming are trying to sell you a tank that is 16,000 gold, 16.3 thousand gold, which if we were to actually look at the gold value of this tank, would cost you in the region of about £50. It is ludicrous how much they are charging for one vehicle as part of a holiday ops operation. So straight off the bat, I'm going to tell you, regardless of kind of what the tank actually performs like in the game, and it isn't crazy, it's not super overpowered for those of you wondering, it is never worth it, in my opinion, to be spending £50 on a singular tank that you will probably play anywhere from between 20 and 50 games within the game. Now, obviously, if you're a whale or you have a financial situation where you're capable of being able to spend 50 quid every week for a new premium tank, then sure, go ahead. Do whatever you want with your own money. It's Christmas coming up. Maybe you want to get it for a Christmas present, whatever. But for the people who are kind of deciding whether I should actually purchase this tank, if you're only going to spend a few pounds every single year and you're wondering, is this the tank I want to pick up this year? I would highly recommend you save your gold and not spend it on the old reliable, because at the end of the day, most people have the Cobra anyway, and it is a typical tank, and there are alternative vehicles to the old reliable that have a similar sort of mechanic where you can deal more damage by firing Hesh rounds. And for example, we look at the Centurion 7/1, which also gets the Hesh rounds when you have the fully upgraded gun, which we might as well pop on for the sake of comparison. You can see here it gets 480 alpha with its Hesh rounds, which is considerably less than the old reliable, but it has better armor for the most part, and it just feels a little bit nicer than the old reliable. And I really enjoyed the Mark 7/1, and at the end of the day, you don't have to pay anything to get this tank compared to paying £50 for the old reliable. So that's kind of my alternative tech tree version that I want to add into some of the videos, just so you guys know that you don't always have to spend money on premium tanks, even if you think that it is kind of worth it. But either way, old reliable, let's get into some gameplay, because I'm sure you want to see how this thing actually works, and I'd be interested to see your thoughts on the pricing of this tank, because it just seems ludicrous, to be honest with you, for one vehicle in the game. And for the example, you can pick up in World War II multiple tanks as part of bundles, usually for a lot cheaper. Unfortunately, we don't actually have any bundles right now, which is literally unheard of within the game, but there you go. Either way, you can pick up multiple tanks for cheaper price than 16,000 gold, and I would recommend that 90% of the time anyway. So either way, let's jump in and I'll see you in a second. Now then, let's jump into the gameplay, because old reliable is one of those tanks that I was very interested to see how it plays, and granted, I'm only going to be able to play it for a limited period of time as part of the rental kind of system that Wargaming allow me to have a look at some of the tanks when they first come into the game, when they're available to you guys at the same time, so I don't get any early access, etc. So obviously the old reliable is a tank that I won't be purchasing. It is superly expensive, and I wouldn't be recommending to you guys not to purchase it if I was then going to go ahead and purchase it myself. So I'm not going to be looking at trying to actually get this tank because I just think it's very expensive, and I definitely wouldn't be spending my money on it. So old reliable in general on a map like this should be pretty good, but unfortunately, as with the majority of games where you play on Westfield and you get heavy tanks on your team, they all for some unknown reason decide to go on the east side of the map, which, for those of you wondering, going on the east side of the map is purely for medium tanks and tank destroyers. If you're going over there in your heavy tanks, it usually is not the play. Like, yes, there are going to be some situations where going over on the east side might be worth it, but if you are in a heavy tank, you should really be going up onto the top of the hill, because if you are not going on top of the hill, you are going to be sacrificing your team's ability to win a lot of the time, so you have to stay very aware of what you're doing when you do play on the eastern side. And usually because you're big, you're slow, and you're a heavy tank, you end up you know, getting taken out quite quickly as medium tanks spot you as you go over to the east, and you generally don't get to spot them back. So yeah, you just get farmed up very easily, and if you lose the western side of this map, you tend to lose the game. So you definitely don't want that to happen, and unfortunately I can't really support this medium tank. I knew that there's going to be a lot of enemy team going to the top of the hill, and so me going in on my own with this medium is probably going to end up with me getting taken out quite quickly. So we don't want to do anything silly, and so we kind of stay in this location. It's quite a defensible spot, even if we've taken, you know, the typical artillery hit for 440 damage or something like that, which was a little bit annoying. But, you know, hey ho, artillery were literally focusing on this game to try and take me out. But we're going to find a way to circumvent the enemy team's push on the western side by trying to play slightly differently and mobilizing ourselves. This tank has 40 kilometers an hour, which is reasonable enough to actually relocate within your games. It's nothing exceptional, and you'll find a lot of other medium tanks have better speeds. So yeah, you have to kind of take that into account. But we're loading Hesh rounds here, mainly because I wanted to hit a light tank, and yeah, I was hoping maybe we'd be able to pen the stockade here if we could get that upper plate. We have 210 pen on this, so it's not the worst in the world, but yeah, given the fact that we've bounced twice, yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to get through the actual stockade's armor unless he gave us the side of the turret, which he appears to be doing. But at this point, it's just trying to splash this guy, and of course then that round misses just as you like. Typical World of Tanks things coming out today, but don't worry, because the damage will start to rack up. I'm not going to show you a game where we've only done like 600 damage or something silly, but the stockade decides he's going to YOLO over the top of the hill on a one shot, so yeah, I'll take it completely. The enemy Concept 1B obviously coming out, and this is where the Hesh rounds are amazing. 540 damage done right there. Then we get hit from the left, which appears to be a Panther by the looks of things. And so we're just trying to escape this guy. It's an Indian Panzer even, so that actually has a pretty horrible gun to be hitting or be hit with. And here you go, this is where the Hesh rounds can be a little bit annoying, and you've got to really know what you're doing when you're using them, as of course I definitely didn't so far, because of the fact that they have lower pen. You can't pen everything. And if we were actually using AP rounds in this game, we'd probably be on about 2,000 damage, so literally double the damage that we're on right now. But because we splash so much, it's just annoying, and so yeah, it kind of sucks in that department. But given that the enemy team have kind of pushed all of the way from the north now, and you're seeing this medium tank slowly working their way into our base, we've really got to be careful. So I come into this location in order to hit me here, like where I am currently, without poking. They'd have to come all the way behind me, at which point I would have to relocate, because there's nothing I can do against these sorts of players. But Concept 1B obviously poking over, thinking that there's not going to be anyone here, and we managed to finish him off. I'm poking here just to see if we can spot anyone. Obviously when you don't, or when you're not reloaded in World of Tanks, you don't typically want to poke, other than to like quick peek to see if there's anyone there, as in spot, and then you can make a decision early whilst you're reloading sometimes. But for the most part, don't poke when you're not reloaded, as you're going to take a lot more damage. But either way, with 1,000 damage into the game and 558 assistance, and the game looking like we might actually end up losing this, I really need to start making some plays. Now, rather than push on my own over to the northern side of the map, let's go and help out the team with these mediums and the heavies, who seem to be dominating our guys in the ravine. Obviously, pushing down in the ravine is not an ideal situation, because you'll get hit by all of the people on top of the hill, and as Obi-Wan said, you don't mess around when someone's on the high ground. So yeah, just avoid doing that if possible. Now the enemy T-41E1 decides he's a big brain player, but unfortunately for him, we're not an absolute complete bot, and so yeah, we load up the Hesh round here. Not that we need it to take this guy out, but there you go, finish him off easily. And we're up to 2.2k damage with 558 assistance. Now you'll notice in that kind of exchange and that fight that we've lost some teammates here, and so I am the furthest one forward. But rather than playing very passively in this game, I need to actually play quite aggressive so I can spot for the team. Otherwise they're going to be kind of sat out in the open, someone on the enemy team is going to spot them, and we're going to end up losing the game. So I need to kind of play and help them out rather than kind of sitting back and letting the team do the work. So as you can see here, this VKB obviously out in the open, we waited for the shot onto the side of him. 210 pen for the side of the VKB, absolutely enough. If it was the front, nowhere near enough, unless you hit the cupola. But either way, we're up to nearly 3k damage so far, and this is where you can actually make use of the great DPM of the Hesh rounds in this tank. And there you go, another bit of assistance. This is what I mean about being the forward force. Provided you're playing in a relatively safe location, you should be able to do okay. And that's kind of how you have to work it. You can see here I'm just poking every now and again, spotting up this Type 61 who's getting hit every now and again, and we're getting assistance damage for that, as well as increasing our chances of winning. And of course the Type 61 is actually kind of a little bit of an underrated vehicle in World of Tanks, that you don't want to just give whatever to this guy. So he actually ends up staying on top of the hill. Don't quite know what was going on here, but we do need to finish him off. We bounced with our, or only splashed him with our Hesh rounds, so yeah, not ideal either. But we're up to 5 enemies taken out so far. The enemy light tank, medium even, the Panther 2 is out there with the SU-130 PM, and he's managed to take out the Panzerjäger. Of course the Panzerjäger is very, very kind of, I would say, OP, to be honest with you, because of the fact that it has unbelievable camo and disgusting DPM. But unfortunately for him, it wasn't enough to take out the Panther and the SU at the same time. But either way, we could still quite easily lose this game. Pushing into an SU-130 PM is not good, especially when you've got a tank that has relatively good DPM in the Panther 2. So we don't want to kind of expose ourselves all too much. We're going to wait for the light tank to see where he's going to find this SU. And you can see here the Panther ends up going forward. We hit him with a nice little Hesh round there. Obviously it's going to finish him off with that round, so there's no worries in that department. But now we've got to try and find out where the SU is. I'm thinking he's over here, but I was actually wrong. He's actually over in A6, which is not too bad because he's kind of partially exposed here. So we should be able to get one round into him. And you can see here we're kind of pre-aiming where he's going to be poking up further on the ridge and get one into him. He's now a one-shot for our AP rounds, which is just as well because we don't have any Hesh rounds left. And there you go, nice little aimed shot at the end to pick up 4.1k damage, 7 enemies taken out and 1600 assistance at the same time, picking up a victory with 1863 base experience, which is pretty good, and somehow clawing out a decent result out of a game where we did nothing for the first probably 3 minutes of the game. So there you go, a nice little 95% badge, not quite a mastery because we just didn't do enough damage, I think, but overall really enjoyed playing this tank. It's just a shame that Wargaming priced it so high that it's going to price out basically everyone from typically buying this vehicle. And I always like playing tanks like this that are a bit novel, a bit more unique, but unfortunately, yeah, we're just priced completely out, and yeah, it's just a shame because I wouldn't have minded it if it was about 10,000 gold, but yeah, 16,000, that's a lot more than I would be willing to part with for one tank on one video game that is supposedly free, and when, you know, you can purchase multiple tanks a year. Yeah, I wouldn't waste my money on this one, but at the end of the day, it's down to you, and I'd be interested to see whether you think it's actually worth it, whether you've bought the tank and think it's good, whether you think it's bad, and kind of give your own opinion as to what you think about this vehicle. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you in the comment section down below, and I'll see you in the next video. If you want to help me out massively, then a like to the video would be greatly appreciated, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great rest of the day. Goodbye.